All right, so we have a very big week ahead. First of all, the government shutdown is closing in its 30th day in a row. So the Fed is also set to drop their interest rate decision this Wednesday for FOMC. And then we'll also hear what Jerome Powell has to say going forward for future expectations during the presser. And that's not it, because we still also have all the big tech earnings. We have Microsoft, Google, Meta, Apple, and Amazon after Tesla's from last week. So this is all coming up this week. That's over $15.2 trillion worth of market cap on the line. So a lot going on. And the final big thing that'll be happening this week is President Trump is meeting with China's president as well. That is on Thursday. And that's only 2 days before his 100% tariff is set to go live. So a lot happening ahead. Want to bring you guys to a flow update. And my goodness, was last week a big week. You could see here we had two insane trades. They both were posted on the Cheddar Flow account here, as you can see. But the AMD calls ended up going up 850% during the day after CPI came in cooler than expected. And these SPY calls were up 400% on the day again after CPI came in cooler than expected. So these were both flagged as highly unusual on the system, as you can see down here. So this post from before, and funny, this person commented everything is unusual on your tweet, LOL. Yesterday puts unusual, today calls a SPY unusual, and kind of a little feedback there because these did end up going quite a bit and indeed was very unusual. If I go to the flow, that wasn't the most interesting thing from last week. The most interesting thing probably had to be the dark pool premium that we saw on Friday. You can see over here, 500 million here on SPY. This one came in about an hour after hours. And then over here, we had way more, like 600 million, 671 million, 671 million, et cetera, et cetera. So if we go to the dark pool levels feature here on Cheddar Flow, we can see this actually was a huge day on Friday, like absolutely massive. The largest day since we had that 11 billion print about a month ago. We had 4.1 billion at the 671.55 level, or 65 level rather. And then over here, 2.8 billion at the 676 level. So all of this here is worth over 7 billion in premium that was seen on Friday. So absolutely insane numbers here at all-time highs as well. So going back to the flow over here, that insane SPY trade and AMD trade they got, we're definitely going to be looking for more of those coming up this week, since because we have a ton of events, you'd assume that these insiders are not going to be sleeping on the wheel, so to speak. They'll probably be back adding more. So if you do want to see flow like that real time, you can use the discount code here, SAVE15, to get 15% off after your 7-day free trial. So if you don't even like it during the 7 days free, you can just cancel. Otherwise, you'll get 15% off thereafter. But you'll be able to check out real-time flow from them. Otherwise, based on flow that we saw Friday after that insane print, there were a couple calls here. For example, this 680, a little bit out the money for the 1218, 26 actually expiration. So this is a leap here. And then also a 0 to expiration, a contract over here for in the money. This one was pretty thick. You can see 8 million in premium, so a lot there. And then also 1.2 million in premium for this put. But realistically, these singular puts just are hedges for the most part. They do not have a high hit rate at all. They've been tracking these for a very long time. And you really want to just see consistent premium print after print for puts out the money for anything significant to happen. Otherwise, if it's just by itself like this, it's probably unlikely to be anything. And the same could be said for calls as well. You typically want to see something flagged as highly unusual, for example. You can see some other ones over here, but very far dated. The December over here, end of the year contract in that case. So not as much happened on Friday in terms of flow compared to what we saw, for example, from the dark pools. And actually, if I go back here for dark pool premium and we go to Wednesday, because the last time I showed you it was a Monday through Wednesday, you can see if I scroll down here, there were a couple other days, for example, 1.3 billion, pretty light there, all things considered. And then going up, you can see not as much beyond the 2.8 billion and the 4.1 billion that I just showed you, when the other big one would be 1.5. So really the meat of the dark pool premium last week was all on Friday, which is why it's so significant that it happened at these levels. And if we go to the chart, if you are bullish, you want to see those levels hold, especially with how this gap formed. So if you guys been watching this channel for a while, you know that this is considered a breakaway gap. And I consider a breakaway gap anything that's a significant gap up, like over 0.5%, 0.3%, et cetera, but it actually holds, and it holds the entire gap level. We don't even come back in to retest it and then bounce. It held the entire gap level by the close. You can see we closed higher than the gap up open from back there. And as a result, this entire gap is left unfilled. So that's considered a breakaway gap. And typically these are during periods of impulsive moves. So normally this is the start of much higher, even though they might sound insane considering where we are right now. S&P 500 is almost at 680, believe it or not. This is still a very good sign as long as it stays open. And that's the key caveat here. You want to see it continue to stay open. And funny enough, a closure of this gap would also be conveniently that dark pool level I just showed you, one of the thick ones from Friday. Rather, because it was signature dark pool print, it actually came in on the Thursday close, since those are delayed by 24 hours. But you can see here, if we were to fall back down, let's say at some point in the future, and then it fills the gap and also falls below that level, then you're going to see a lot more downside to come, likely going to take out these local lows from before, from over here around like 650 or so. But as long as this gap remains unfilled and this level continues to hold, you're going to see more upside, guys. As crazy as it sounds, like I've been saying, still no confirmation of a short yet. And as a result, you're just going to continue to bid in the short term. So would like to see that gap hold. It's kind of my plan for the S&P 500. Now for another ticker of interest, it's actually Tesla. This one I am very fond of, and this is something that I mentioned before. Things get fun above roughly 439.97. That's where I have my pivot level. And realistically, we've been seeing a lot of flow on this name. If I go over to Cheddar Flow really quick, we can actually see here on the Gamma feature, there is a lot of exposure still at that 500 level. There's a significant call wall for the all expirations. Majority of the expirations for this are December, some November as well, but there's over 100 million in premium for something that's ridiculously far out the money. Like it closed at around 430 or so. Spot price was 432.50 by the close on Friday. So that's very far away. And the fact that there's that much exposure up here is still very interesting to me at that level. So you would expect bulls would want to carry it towards there as it nears the expiration. At least that's a good sign. There's still a lot of exposure after earnings because it was like that before earnings as well. So going back to the chart, I'm still watching that 439.97 level. We actually did have a daily close over it on Thursday, matter of fact, but it was unable to hold on the weekly for Friday. So going forward, I'm fond of even just a daily close. I'm above it any day this week and this upcoming week here. So would like to see that happen. If that's to be the case, that's good confirmation of a lot more upside. I can see this going to a new local high, which would be above 470. And then beyond that, honestly, the sights would be set for 500. So that's all contingent on it holding above 439.87, which was unable to do on Friday of last week. But if they can reclaim it, like I said, that'd be beautiful, as well as this downtrend would break at the same time. So it'd be a nice simultaneous break of a key pivot as well as a key downtrend. And that is why things can get fun well above that level. So I'm watching that for confirmation. Ideally daily close, like I mentioned, going into this week, and then we can see a lot more upside because bulls are very fond of this one. They'd like to see a lot more upside based on their exposure, plus the technicals are primed for it, at least in terms of accumulation, if it is able to break above that. Otherwise, you're going to see a lot more chop. I'm not interested in trading any of this chop here, especially with calls, especially with how high premium they are for calls on Tesla. You're going to see quite a bit of theta burn on that if it continues to chop in this range, but my bets are on if it's able to crack above this 439.87. So that's what I'm watching for here in the future. And the final thing I do want to mention is an update on NVDA, because you guys remembered I was fond of this one as well in the previous week, and we actually did have a very nice upside move to confirm a breakout back above this previous range. So instead of chopping like I drew last week over here, we had a very nice retest in this circle that I also drew last week of this previous range. Remember, we had an inverse head and shoulder, previous range bound activity, broke out over here, retested it over here, and now we have our first candle of confirmation that the retest was a success. So therefore, going forward, risk is now about 179 below where both of these wicks were, since there's very clear demand in this area in that previous range. And as long as it stays above here, you're going to see it continue to go to around 200 plus. So I like this one going into this week. Best if possible, you can catch it around 183 or so. That's what I'm looking for a long. And as long as it stays above that 179 level, it is good to go for continuation to 200. So that's the plan for this week on both Tesla, NVIDIA, and the S&P 500. As always, appreciate you guys watching this video. I'll see you next time.